In the Valley of the Shadow, God's Promise of Presence Part 3. Psalm 46 verse 1 says, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. For anyone grieving, these words can feel like both a lifeline and a challenge. How do you grasp this truth when your world feels shattered? Let's explore this verse through the lens of loss, heartbreak, and the fragile journey of healing. Grief is like a storm, overwhelming, and at times, suffocating. It can feel as though the ground beneath you has been swept away, leaving you in free fall. In moments like these, the idea of God as a refuge might seem distant or abstract. But a refuge isn't something you have to build. It's already there, waiting for you. God is that safe place where you can bring every tear, every question, and every ounce of anger or despair. When I lost someone close to me, I didn't immediately run to God. In fact, I either hurled angry words at him, or I turned away from him altogether. I demanded answer to my questions. Like, how could he let this happen? Where was he when my world was falling apart? Those were my questions, raw, honest, and sometimes, I just shouted into the darkness, which felt like screaming into a pillow. But here's the beautiful thing about God being our refuge. Just like our parents were big enough to handle our childhood tantrums, our God is big enough to handle our adult emotional tantrums. He doesn't require polished prayers or perfect faith. You can simply come to him exactly as you are. Broken, bruised, angry, sad, fearful, whatever the emotion, he can handle it. God is our strength. The verse continues. In the depths of grief, strength feels unrealistic because the process of grief renders us completely vulnerable. Just getting out of bed or taking the next breath can feel like climbing a mountain. But the courage to keep going isn't about mustering up your own strength. It's about leaning into his. There were days when I couldn't even pray, let alone perform daily activities. And yet I found his strength showing up in unexpected ways. Through a kind word or deed from a friend, a moment of peace in nature, or even a quiet assurance that I wasn't alone. God's strength doesn't always look like a dramatic rescue. Sometimes it's the quiet, steady presence that keeps you going when you feel you can't. The final part of the verse describes God as an ever-present help in trouble. Ever-present. That means he's not just there in the big moments of crisis, but also in the quiet, painful aftermath, the long nights, the empty rooms, the anniversaries that hit like a tidal wave. In my journey through grief, I've found that God's presence isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's a whisper, a nudge, or a sense of calm that doesn't make sense given the circumstances. But he is there, always, present, even when I don't recognize it at the time. If you're grieving, I want you to know it's okay to feel everything that you're feeling. The sorrow, the anger, the numbness. Grief isn't a straight line, and there's no right way to experience it. But Psalm 46 verse 1 offers a gentle reminder that you don't have to experience it alone. God is your refuge, a place to rest when you're weary. He is your strength, carrying you when you can't carry yourself. And he is ever present. Just like a soldier in battle helps a wounded comrade off the field to receive medical attention, so God helps you walk through this dark valley, one tear and one step at a time. In my darkest moments, I've held onto this truth. God doesn't promise a life free of pain, but He does promise His presence. And His presence changes everything. It doesn't erase the grief, but it will, in time, rescue you from the valley of the shadow. It doesn't always take away the storm, but it anchors you within it. Psalm 46 verse 1 isn't just a verse to memorize. It's a lifeline to cling to when everything else feels like it's falling apart. So if you're in the midst of grief, know this. It's okay to feel broken. It's okay to question. And it's okay to not be okay. God isn't waiting for you to have it all together before He meets you in this dark valley. Because an all-knowing God knew you would be at this exact place, at this exact time in your life. He went to the valley ahead of you to be there when you arrived. He's there with arms wide open, offering His refuge, His strength, and His unshakable presence. Lean into Him. Whisper your pain, shout your questions, or simply sit in silence. He's listening. And in time, you might find that His refuge isn't just a place to hide. It's a place to heal. Grief is a process, and healing rarely comes quickly or easily. But as you navigate this journey, let yourself be open to moments of grace. It might be a solitary walk on the beach, a memory that brings both tears and a smile, or the quiet comfort of a friend just showing up. These small mercies are not coincidences. They are reminders that God is with you, even in your pain. His presence doesn't diminish the weight of your loss, but it does remind you that you're not carrying it alone. Sometimes, grief brings up guilt. Guilt for feeling angry at God, for not moving on, or for experiencing moments of joy in the midst of sorrow. But God's love is not based on how well you handle your grief. He meets you where you are, without judgment, and walks with you at your pace. You don't have to rush the process or force yourself to feel better before you're ready. Just trust that God's timing is perfect, even when it feels painfully slow. Lastly, remember that God's refuge is not only for you to receive but also to share. As you experience His comfort, you may find opportunities to extend that same comfort to others. Whether it's through a kind word or deed, or maybe even a listening ear, you can reflect God's love to those who are also grieving. In doing so, you may discover that healing often comes through connection and shared compassion. Grief may never fully go away, but neither does God's presence. He remains steadfast, a refuge and strength, inviting you to lean on Him every step of the way. And as you do, you might just find that while the pain is real, so too is His peace, His grace, and His promise of presence as you walk every step in the valley of the shadow. Thank you. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. And on this channel, we grievers support each other by dropping a comment or posting a heart emoji down below. Finally, please check out our other videos for comfort during your time of grief.